So, hello there, Kieran. It's uh, it's 9 o'clock now. Maybe um, you can take a few moments to introduce yourself, and then we'll get started. I'll leave it to you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me, Bante, and thank you everybody for coming. Yeah, what to say to introduce myself? I suppose what's relevant to tonight's topic is that I've been vegan for a number of years, and meditation and studies associated with meditation have been the main interest, passion of my adult life. And tonight's talk, I think, will be somewhat seat of the pants. I wrote down a bunch of notes that may be a structure of what I have to say and may not. And also, I just very much hope to hear from other people. So after I talk for a time, any questions, thoughts, objections that anybody might have to any of what I've said. So, yeah. Shall I wait a little longer to launch into it, Bante?
Yeah, maybe we wait just another couple minutes to give people a little bit more time to join in and to settle in. And just a couple minutes, and then we'll get into it. And of course, my deep thanks for you being here, Kieran. And I'm sure a lot of people are really going to get benefit from this talk, this exploration.
And I suppose I could say a further bit about, what shape my interest has taken in the very broad and intricate territory of Buddhist study and other, non-dually oriented traditions or what have you. Which is to say, I've hung out largely at Zen centers and at sort of a post-Zen center where I live and work now, Springwater Center. But I've also, long been interested in Dzogchen and Mahamudra and in various corners of the Theravadan tradition. Hi, Sienna. and Advaita and what have you. And the common thread in all of these has been like an attraction to what becomes possible meditatively when things are very unforced, when I'm not pushing my experience around and instead just the spontaneous sensitivity that is just sort of available to an animal organism gets to coalesce and awareness coalesces or coheres on its own. So effortless approaches to meditation, in a certain sense of effortless, has been my attraction. So should I launch into it or wait a little longer?
I think we're just about all set. So why don't you go ahead, Kieran?
All right. So hi everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Let's see. So when Bante and I were talking this morning, chatting on Facebook Messenger about what the title of tonight's talk would be, I was coming up with it on the fly. And what I ultimately arrived at, and I say it now as sort of a reference for myself, and to give you a bit of a sense of the lay of the land of what I hope to cover, was, let's see, I wrote it down, the Non-Human Sangha, Animal Justice, Sensuous Ethics, and Non-Duality. So animal justice probably needs less explanation than some of the other bits. non-duality, you couldn't give enough explanation, so I won't bother. Sensuous ethics. Basically, what I have in mind with that is just sort of like the ethical feeling and ethical response to the world that comes when we are really living in our senses, you know, when if at this moment I pause a little bit from my anxious attempts to explain things and, you know, drink in y'all's faces, right? And all the colors and shapes and body language and what have you. And so this is of great interest to me, partly because of how it kind of bounces off certain ways of talking in like the non-duality world, both sort of Buddhist non-dual thought and Advaita and unaffiliated non-dual thought. Ethics are sometimes kind of lack thereof, which can, for instance, like you'll often hear about these paradoxes, right? To the effect of everything is perfect and there's room for improvement, or like light and dark are totally interdependent and inseparable, and it's good to try and make more light in the world and drive the darkness out. Or like every atom in existence is like an expression of an unlimited love, is a thing sometimes people might say. And at the same time, there's harm and trauma and twisted relations and psyches, you know. So I'm getting way ahead of myself, but I feel like these kinds of paradoxes I'm a little bit suspicious of. There are versions of these paradoxes that I find lovely, and that they speak to immediate embodied experience well, and don't require that you twist your brain into some unnatural shape. But there are many others that don't. And so I'm interested in like, how does that rub up against sensuous ethics? You know, the ethical feeling that, like, you know, a dog has for you when you come home and say hello to your dog, you know, the love and tenderness and responsiveness and reading of your mood and what have you. Those are the parts that are most unfinished in my own thought, and they just kind of like came to me in the past day or two. The other bits that I hope to go over are kind of more straightforward, and I'm a little bit less interested in them in a way, but they're still interesting. And they are to do with Buddhist ethics, taking off of the 5 lay precepts, for instance, and then just a little bit about the moral status of animals, and most especially farmed animals, is just sort of the easiest case to work with. So, the 5 precepts, as probably many people know, the first 3, I would say, are the most applicable to our treatment of non-humans. I won't get too fancy with it, but basically not killing, not stealing or taking what is not freely given to us, and refraining from sexual misconduct, from harm through sexuality, or harm of people's sexual being or animal sexual being. And so if we just bear these in mind, right, when we consider, you know, the life of a dairy cow or the life of an egg-laying hen, you know, it's, and if we really imagine the subjectivity of this cow or this egg-laying hen, you know, it's I think you'll see what painful resonances arise. So, you know, the standard life of a dairy cow, and this is not even in like the worst factory farms or anything, it's just most any dairy operation anywhere, is that she's taken away from her mother at just a day or two old, separated, and you know, they cry out for each other, quite literally. And then she's forcibly impregnated, and she, you know, brings her child to term. And then once she gives birth, that child is taken away from her within a few days. And if it's a male cow, that is to say a bull, it goes to a veal crate 80% of the time. So, you know, it's just like unbelievable trauma, right? To be separated from its mother and then just separated from all warmth and care for the rest of its short life. And then she, basically as soon as she can be impregnated again, she is. And she spends most of her life pregnant, losing her child after it's born. And then when her productivity declines from this abuse, she's killed at a fraction of her natural life cycle. So in all that, I think we can see there's killing of cows before they would naturally die, killing of the male calves in veal crates. There's obviously taking what is not given, taking the milk that is not given, it's intended for the child, taking the child that is obviously not given. And then sexual misconduct, right? This is commandeering a mother animal's reproductive system for human ends. So, but the one reason that for now I'll stop there. I could give a similar tale about the life of an egg-laying hen, and remember that this is like the bare minimum of abuses, basically, right? There's many things that get piled on that determine whether every second of an animal's life is traumatic or whether it's just intermittent trauma. But what I really want to do is, because it can so easily take on a flavor, this kind of talk of just like the weight of the moral wrong we're doing, and therefore saying you should do better if you are not yet vegan, basically. And something lately to me feels like missing in that. As far as it seems to me that there's actually something very enriching for us that we're missing out on by casting all these animals out of our hearts, out of our circle of compassion, out of our thought, and casting in a way just like the whole animal way of being in the world, non-human way of being in the world out of our consciousness. So this is a kind of, unfortunately for all of y'all, not a very well thought through thought, but so men, right?
Kieran, you dropped out for a moment there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Just for 15 seconds or so.
Okay. Yeah, it says my internet connection is unstable. Uh-oh. I hope that doesn't last too long. So yes, but so I was saying, I'm just wondering about how analogous it is, our speciesism, our objectification of animals and casting them out of our hearts, out of our sort of neighborhood, you know, making them not our neighbors. How analogous that is to the effect that patriarchy has not only on the consciousness of women, but also men. You know, that this rigid splitting of gender roles cramps who men can be and the domination of women is not fulfilling for men, and in a similar way, I feel like there's really something here. And that's why I use the phrase, the non-human Sangha. In a very real way, not just kind of a cute way, I feel like animals can be a tremendous support for our practice, for our touching of awakened possibility and compassionate possibility. And it's funny that I would say this, because I realize as soon as I start thinking along these lines, how little of that there is in my life, Like I actually, I don't have any companion animals, dogs or cats or anybody who lives with me. And I in fact, like, although I've spent a lot of time like concocting arguments to persuade people to go vegan and stuff, I haven't spent as much time deeply imagining what my neighbors, cows, pigs, chickens are experiencing. So I'm talking to myself here. Okay. So, as I've said, I think that like it's very hard to deny that the lay precepts compel veganism, despite the fact that historically they've not been interpreted that way, and famously, the Buddha seems not to have required even vegetarianism of his Sangha. But I feel that nevertheless, the logic of the precepts and the logic just of limitless benevolence and non-harm is clear. So, so there's that. Now I want to, let's see, should I go into this? Oh, and just to say that, Buddhism as a religion, as a system of thought, famously concerns itself with suffering and the end of suffering, right? It doesn't concern itself with sin or with like a compact with God that we must fulfill the will of God. So right there, it makes it very clear that an overriding concern should be, right? How gentle can we be? How good neighbors can we be to those we share the earth with? And it's clear, in fact, even though like the headlines on CNN or whatever do not reveal it, it's clear that like the hugest category of suffering there is, the hugest category of trauma, is what we do to farmed animals and fished animals. So, if people don't know, the numbers that we kill each year, and that doesn't even include the numbers that we are mistreating, that we're not killing this year. The numbers of animals we kill are more than the number of human beings who have ever lived. Not just the numbers on the planet, but the total who have lived in history. So it's quite amazing how, headlines and human conversation structure our thinking such that they are so out of sight, out of mind, and yet it's the largest atrocity in a way there is. Okay, you know what? I wonder if I should cut off a little bit of what I intended to talk about. Probably, no doubt I will. Just a moment. Okay, so yeah, I'll do this a little bit. This is a little bit of kind of classic anti-speciesist logic. It's almost, I think of it as almost like a mathematical logic. When we ask like, how much do we owe to a cow, a pig, a fish, morally? What do we owe them as far as how we take care of them? Compared to what we owe to other humans. And, you know, so it's a little bit of just like a logical exercise, but it's one that I feel gives leverage under the whole imagination, the whole feeling imagination, that over time, in my experience, can change like our instinctive feeling about how bad it is to harm a non-human. You know, I still have deep reflexes that feel like it's not as bad somehow, at least when my imagination isn't fully engaging with the subjectivity of an individual animal. But I feel like that has been reduced somewhat, in part by these reasonings. So, speciesism is usually defined as like any other ism, any other prejudice, oppressive prejudice. It's treating equal interests in being well treated, being well loved, treating equal interests unequally because of morally irrelevant differences. So, you know, although a cow or a pig experiences fear, pain, the suffering from losing loved ones or from not having loved ones around, presumably very, very similarly to any human does. You know, so like what justifies treating that less seriously? You know, and I feel like we maybe have some vague intuition that like, oh, we can treat it less seriously because humans have like uniquely refined sensibilities or something, you know, like we can appreciate Mozart, we can, whatever it might be. But I would suggest that this is not very well thought through, because in the human world, when do we feel like we owe the most to other humans, you know? It's not when they're listening to Mozart. It's when they're most terrified, most hungry, most scared, when their whole brain is concerned with survival, right? And there's very little bandwidth left over for refined sensibility or doing advanced physics, you know, or whatever it might be. And not only that, like, you know, neurologically, we know that when somebody is suffering intense fear, etc., it's precisely then that their cognitive capacity gets very much less, you know? And yet, surely we don't feel that we owe less to someone then. We don't feel that we can, you know, that we have to treat Mozart 10 times better than somebody of less remarkable achievement, or that, you know, if someone is brain damaged, you know, we don't owe them tenderness and a good life anymore. So, so I hope that was clear, just to begin to think about like what really justifies us treating animals as in a totally different category than human beings morally. And as I kind of alluded to, sometimes this takes the form of an argument from marginal cases, so-called. And an example might be a person with brain damage, right? Who maybe their cognitive capacity, their sophistication about the social world and the world that we live in is very comparable to a cow's or a pig's, say. You know, oh, I half lost the thought. But so, you know, surely we don't feel that therefore we can, you know, do the sort of thing I described that we do to dairy cows. You know, that would be considered the most obscene atrocity, you know. So enough of that for the moment. Now, let me see if I can say something about a somewhat happier subject, which is this business of sensuous ethics and what perhaps the company of an animal can, in a really direct way, you know, by osmosis, by darshan, as a Hindu might say, can teach us something very beautiful, right? And inform our meditation practice, inform our ethical response to the world, inform our imaginative response to the world. You know, when I chill out for a moment, when I relax my efforts to define my experience of this moment with all its colors and shapes and sensations. Oh man, sorry, it kind of it makes me just realize how tired I am and how much I just want to like soak in that for a while. Oh man, not have to complete the argument. Okay, give me a minute here. I guess the main thing I want to say is just how intelligent we are at such moments, right? How intelligent we are when like our attention is sunk in the colors and shapes around us and the real presence of the body rather than the kind of traumatized, stereotyped image of the body as a threatened little something. Which reminds me, so like this is something that I know I feel like I've been taught by, for instance, my dog Ramona back in the day. She was a black lab of very big personality. She was very much herself, right? And something about like the way that animals let their bodies just spill into the world, you know, less so if they've been traumatized. And I'll say more about that in a moment. But, you know, the way that they're just like, okay, I belong here, you know, no doubt about it. And the feeling that I imagine going along with that, which is one of just like the feeling of the body being really continuous with the room they're in or with the breezes. And with the gazes of their loved ones, you know, and they want to be near to their loved ones, cuddle up with them and stuff. You know, compare this to us who, on the one hand, will often have great self-consciousness about our physical appearance in a way that, like, all day long can make us feel contracted. Like my body isn't allowed to spill into the world, or it will be excessive. You know, if I'm overweight, it will be excessive. If I have some feature on my face that I don't like people seeing, you know. So yes, so there's something beautiful and in a way quite non-dual, quite lacking in inside and outside in the most direct and somatic way about the way some animals, some of the time are in the world. And nevertheless, of course, you know, they can have a contracted body feeling. And they very much will have that if they've been. But I speculate, I imagine, because of very immediate physical harm or a sharp voice directed at them or something like that, more than it is the complicated things that give us this frozen body feeling, you know, which can be so complex, right? So people's ideas about us and whether we're, well, I'm not coming up with good examples, but I'm sure I don't have to tell you about the complexity of the thoughts all day long that give us a frozen body feeling that reflects our sort of frozen psyche. In a general sense, traumatized psyche. I don't mean necessarily any sharp particular trauma, but just the trauma that lets us not spill into the world freely and assuming we will be embraced by the world. Which to my mind that's kind of how I feel about meditation, you know, is that it's a letting spill of everything. It's a letting spill of all my impulses, thoughts, sensations. And when they're allowed to spill so that I don't have to resist them, I don't have to, you know, I don't have to even say, how am I doing now, you know, in terms of spiritual progress or in terms of social relations, you know, how do I compare to others? That total freedom just to be curious. What is it like right now without a word, without any assumption about the way I'm supposed to be as a meditator or whatever? Just the freedom to let everything unfold. And then there's less feeling that this unfolding divides into like me, the meditator, and everything else. You know, there's more this loose body feeling of everything just appearing on its own, and when it's not resisted or manhandled, transparent on its own. You know, there's just like this sensitivity, this transparent awareness that doesn't need to be earned or achieved, right? It's just the nature of things when I leave them alone. So I feel like that's probably enough for now. And I'll just invite any thoughts anybody might have about any of this.
Okay, so thank you, Kieran. If anyone would like to ask a question or to share something, please go ahead and write it, or just make us aware somehow, and we will give you the mic, so to speak. We do have a few comments that came through the YouTube, and Hoa Lu in particular said, "Love the way of connecting milk consumption into precepts. I never thought that way." I also really appreciated that, Kieran, how the precepts apply to what we consume as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's good to hear. I'll give a moment, see if to see if anybody has anything. But if not, I could maybe prime the pump by reading a little something that I found on the bulletin board at the center where I live today from Longshenpa, the great Dzogchen expositor. But I'll give a moment first. That's just if we need to get things livelied up that way.
A moment of non-duality.
Yeah. There's a question from Sienna. Was there a particular event in your life that led you to veganism? Sorry, my connection isn't great. There wasn't. I went vegetarian at the, lacto-ovo vegetarian, still eating eggs and milk, at the age of 16 when I got into yoga and meditation. And just because I figured that was like what you were supposed to do, I didn't really give it any ethical thought at all. And then years later, I read some books. I think in my case, it happened to be Peter Singer's Animal Liberation, plus Jonathan Safran Foer's Eating Animals, which filled out some practical details about the way animals are treated on farms, that just kind of talked me into that I didn't have a justification for not going vegan, but I still put it off for a year, actually. And sometimes I would tear my hair out telling my friends that I wish I were vegan, but I haven't done it yet. But so like, it's interesting how for me, at least, the more urgent feeling about the fact that animals are suffering right now, that came later. It's almost like I gave myself permission to start thinking and feeling about that by being first philosophically convinced, that I needed to pay it attention and give it a lot of weight. So yeah, I wish I had a more startling story. I know people who do have very amazing stories of working on dairy farms and seeing what was involved or something like that. But see, there's some questions down there. Oh, I'm glad that Maya asked this last one, but I'll start with Steve's, which I haven't read yet. Do you find the violation of precepts for milk and egg consumption a stronger relationship to large industry farming? Is there less violation among small farms, local farms, etc.? So yes, there's no doubt that the worst abuses are, which I don't even like to name. They're so unbelievably indecent and beyond us, beyond what we should be doing of the large factory farms and such. But that said, I think we are capable of very much better than what we do on even so-called small family farms and humane farms. And there's a whole lot of whitewashing that happens. It's very common for people to talk about, okay, well, I'm careful to choose humanely raised meat or milk or what have you. And I could go into the details of how many places that breaks down, that as soon as you are commodifying the body of a being, you are not going to be treating it like a pet or a neighbor. There's going to be 1,000 places where profit takes priority over treating it well. And there's many practical ways that we could show that happens. But most of all, it's just kind of like, if you don't know if you'll wake up tomorrow as yourself or as, a pasture-raised beef cattle, would you be in favor of this practice of pasture-raised beef cattle? I certainly would not. It still is far less than how well we're capable of treating these beings. And they're social beings. So even if someone imagines, oh, they live a good life, and then there's a sudden shock to their head and they aren't existing anymore, how bad is that? Bear in mind that you're taking away someone's mother or father or brother or playmate, and bear in mind that even a pasture-raised beef cow, for instance, gets fattened on an unhealthy diet for the last months of its life. It has the total just traumatic abandonment of being taken on a highway to a slaughterhouse, and just its last moments are so cold and terrifying. And not only that, but animals are just bred to be unhealthy in these things. The prophet has caused even the shape of their bodies to be not for their own benefit, but for ours. So it's just kind of indecent. And this is all the ethical argument, this is all even before we talk about the fact that in order for cows to exist in the numbers they do for our consumption, so many animals have to go extinct. 60 to 90% of the rainforest is destroyed either for cattle grazing or for corn and soy that mostly feeds cattle. So most of the land use on Earth is connected to animal agriculture. So people sometimes will say, oh, what about if we stop eating cattle? Won't we not have cattle around anymore? And of course, there would still be a few cattle around, but moreover, it's at the expense of a gazillion other species. So I know that wasn't part of your question, Steve. I'm just, adding anything when I think of it. And anybody feel free to follow up, when I'm answering a question, if I miss something or you want to go into something else. Oh, sorry, Steve has followed up here. I have some experience working on small farms, and I'm not sure the animals are deeply suffering the same way. Thank you, Kieran. I understand the answer for even small farming. Those are thoughtful answers, much appreciation. Yeah, and I would imagine that in particular for dairy, for instance, it's very hard to think of a remotely ethical version of dairy, that is for profit. So,
Kieran,
yes,
we do have someone on the YouTube who asked a question here. This is from Hoalu, and they say, I feel more separated from my friends and group community since I became vegan. Sometimes I feel angry with them as they are bad persons. Could you share about your experience about this?
Yeah, and that connects also to Maya's question. Maya says, how do you handle frustration with people who do not believe in veganism, especially close people? And so, yes, in my experience, it can be incredibly lonely. It's getting less lonely swiftly in recent times when veganism is kind of having a moment and getting more respect. But yes, like 3 meals a day, you have to ask yourself, do I hold my tongue now, because everybody will think I'm a tiresome vegan if I speak up, or do I say something, because even though it's so routine and it's like from sea to shining sea, this is what people do. Every, piece of meat on someone's plate or egg is evidence of like a really awful violence, right? But I must also say that I don't think in terms of people being bad people at all, I think you can be an utterly decent person and just never think about this, because everything is set up to prevent you thinking about it, both literally, physically, with the animals being out of sight, out of mind. There's even ag-gag laws that make it illegal in one way or another to show the public what's happening on these private property is full of atrocities where the animals are kept. I forgot how I started that sentence. Feel the sleepiness. Sip of coffee. But so I don't think of people as bad people. I know very well that I didn't give a first or second thought, to animal suffering, because everybody told me that it was just normal in the cycle of life and the way things had always been and nothing wrong with it, So I don't see it at all as a matter of individual bad people, but as a huge cultural blind spot. And actually one that can be incredibly insightful for us, right? Like if we think, oh, how could somebody have ever been in favor of enslaving humans, or how could someone ever have felt that child labor was okay, or that extreme limitation on what women can do in a society is okay? How can anyone feel that way? And I feel like this certainly helps my imagination of how I could fall into those traps myself if just everyone around me acts like it is so normal and ancient and traditional, and you just don't think about it. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I do find it very difficult. But that wasn't my experience at all. It came very easily. But what's hard is like the view from underneath of the world that it gives you every hour of the day, and having to interact with everybody who maybe hasn't taken the same journey and thought. So. Gabriel asks, I work in a grocery store and I see vegetarian products that are like cheese, egg, and meat substitutes. Is this the best we can do in our consumerist society to at least lessen the blow towards animals? Is this the best we can do? Right. Well, I certainly have very little objection to such things, and I find some of them very tasty. So yeah, I don't think there's anything morally wrong with like liking the taste of meat, you know. It's just that unfortunately it takes extreme violence to have that taste. So if you like the taste of an Impossible burger, you know, go for it, I would say. And indeed, I very much hope, although I'm not sure that it will ever work out in terms of economies of scale, but I very much hope that lab-grown meats get more cheap and successful. That is to say, these are meats that are basically molecularly identical to meats that are gotten through violence, but they're grown in a lab instead. So I'm not sure if that's really touching your question about the best we can do in a consumerist society, because certainly some of these products are still going to be less than ideal in their labor practices, in their, I don't know what else. But at the very least, they're going to be vastly less impact on the environment than any animal product will be. Maya says, I feel very guilty for feeding my cat meat, which is something I have to do as they are obligate carnivores. Oh, sorry, just before I get to that, one final thought. You sometimes hear people say, like in leftist circles, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, right? They'll say this kind of, if you're bothering them about how they should go vegan, right? They'll say, anything you do involves exploitation. Anything you purchase involves exploitation, which is pretty true, I think. However, two points are overlooked in that. The first is that there is absolutely no economic system, hyper-capitalist or not, under which commodifying the very bodies of beings is ethical. You know, killing them for food, enslaving them for food is ethical. Yes, and then the second point is to say that there is no ethical consumption under capitalism is very different from saying all consumption under capitalism is equally unethical. There are vast differences, and buying animal products is, you know, hugely worse than many others, even also in terms of the treatment of workers, you know, very marginal workers working in slaughterhouses without many choices, being traumatized by their work, and risking very bad accidents and health. A lot of displacement of indigenous peoples because of the land use of these things. So even without considering the animals, you know, I like to say, even if all the suffering billions on farms were automatons, if they didn't suffer, if they didn't have consciousness, all these cows and pigs and stuff, it would still be a very strong reasons to go vegan, just because of how much it destroys the earth, these practices, and how much it destroys communities. And exploits workers and stuff like that. Okay, Maya's got a tough question. I feel very guilty for feeding my cat meat, which is something I have to do as they are obligate carnivores. I love cats and always want to live with them, but almost every mealtime I think about the life that was taken. Yeah, it is a tricky one. I mean, I personally don't keep a cat and never will, because I don't want to deal with that dilemma. Not to mention that if you keep a cat indoors all the time, that cat is not going to be thriving. And if you let it outdoors, it will like decimate songbird populations and stuff like that. Cats are a huge cause actually of wildlife destruction. But I love cats. So, you know, and I know many people love cats. I have been told that that it's not impossible to feed a cat a vegan diet. You have to supplement with, oh, I always forget the name of it. You know, there's one very particular chemical that as obligate carnivores cats need. And you know, similarly to vegan supplementing for B12, you can feed them a diet that includes that. And there are cats that thrive on that diet. Whether every cat can thrive, I don't know. And that would be another very good thing about getting lab-grown meat off the ground to feed to these animals. But it is very tricky, you know, like to say that we should keep a cat, you know, and therefore end the lives of many other animals in order to keep a cat. You know, it's actually, I would feel bad about it too. So, yeah.
Kieran, we have a bit of a challenge here, and I guess we'll have to see how you answer to it. For the YouTube channel, JT says, our reality is almost nothing but a massive food chain. Why object to reality? The cosmos is a snake eating its own tail in a way. No choice about this. They also added they hope that their speech wasn't rude.
No, not rude, and a pretty common objection you hear, actually. So the first thing I would say is, if it were normal for us to eat people, would you object to that? You know, if that was just part of the natural food chain and we've been doing it for a gazillion years, you know, would you object to that? Or do you think we should stop that practice of keeping certain people on farms to be killed or to drink their milk or to, etc.? If not, why do you draw the line there? Why do you feel like it is just natural to be eating non-humans, but not humans? I mean, there's that, but basically, you know, it's an appeal to nature, right? It's saying that because something seems to be the way things happen in the natural world, it's good. And to say that something is natural is not to say that it's good, right? I mean, I think, in fact, that for all the romance we have about like the harmony of nature, when a gazelle is being attacked and eaten by a lion, that is an unbelievably horrific, traumatic moment for that gazelle, you know? Like, obviously we can't stop that. We can't prevent that without making things very much worse. But I don't think we have to see it in any mystical sense as a harmonious, beautiful thing. You know, I think it's pretty scary and painful, you know? It's true, we can't fix that about the world. That's the way it works. And there are obligate carnivores. But it doesn't begin to say that we should act that way any more than the fact that, like, you know, there's rape in the natural world means we should rape, or indeed the fact that like humans have raped for a long time. I don't know if that is satisfactory or not, but. Oh, Lucas echoed what I said. Big is ought fallacy on the challenge.
Kieran, did you want to take any more questions? Is there anything else that you wanted to share or present that you had prepared?
There was some really, really interesting, subtle stuff I prepared that I feel, frankly, too tired to do justice to. One afterthought just occurred to me from the thing I was just saying, which is just that once when I saw Peter Singer speak, who's many people consider like a foundational philosopher of animal liberation, I actually disagree with him on a bunch of points, but he's definitely been an important figure. I saw him speak once and somebody asked him, you know, should we stop lions from eating gazelles? Should we stop bears from eating fish? Should we, you know, if we were able to do that, should we stop them doing that? And I loved his answer, you know. he said, if we were able to do that without making things worse, we absolutely should, So it's not because there's like some beautiful harmony to that we shouldn't. It's just because we can't interfere without making things worse. That's the only reason, So I liked that answer. I know it's not for everybody, but for me, yeah, I wouldn't mind a world that was like the lion lying down with the lamb and all beings totally gentle to each other and we can just eat grass. That would be fine by me. Wouldn't feel like we lost anything in harmony.
Perhaps we can genetically engineer lions and tigers and bears that are friendly to lambs and also eat a vegetarian diet, right? It's possible. So, Kieran, I do really respect and appreciate your time. And we do have one question here that I think would be really suitable to answer just for anyone watching. And then, I think maybe we should end soon so that you can get a good rest. But I think this is a really important question, and that is there a better way to be vegetarian? I'm vegetarian 1 year now. So possibly are there any particular things that people should look at or consider in becoming a vegetarian or becoming a vegan so that they can do it in a healthy way?
Okay, right. So there's lots of resources to be found as far as nutrition and stuff. Unfortunately, I don't have any to hand, but let's see, what are some broad things I can say? I mean, I personally do supplement for not only B12, but D3, vitamin D3, and the DHA and EPA forms of omega-3 fatty acids, which basically that's just seaweed. It's found in seaweed. That's where fish get those fatty acids from. Omega-3 ALA is the other form, and that's what's found in plants, found in flax meal and chia seeds and walnuts and stuff. Your body converts some amount of that to the other forms, but it's a minority. So just for insurance, I personally take that other one. By the by, they say that like everybody should supplement for B12 after a certain age when absorption declines, even if you are a flesh eater. And they also say that like maybe everybody should supplement no matter what, because and in a sense, everybody does supplement because the soil is so depleted of B12 that they actually like inject meat animals with B12 in order to get it into people, weirdly enough, so there's that. But, there's no mystery to it if you know about the micronutrients you need and the macronutrients. We're learning more every day, but basically, as far as protein goes, for instance, you need the 20 amino acids and you need them in sufficient quantities. And so if you eat a variety of vegan proteins, you will get that, along with, many more micronutrients and fiber than you would get if you're eating meat. So it has advantages in that way. Tofu, seitan, nutritional yeast is actually it's like one of the highest gram for gram protein sources there is, higher than meat, but you wouldn't eat a huge amount of it. And of course, beans, lentils are a little higher than others in protein. Pumpkin seeds are a little higher than some others, and they have which is acid that's a little low in seitan, for instance. I believe that's true. So if you have seitan, which is super high protein, wheat gluten, have yourself some pumpkin seeds or some soy sauce to balance that out. I don't know, but basically, I can't give a whole talk on that now, but you can find resources.
So Kieran, before we go, just while we have you here, what is the quickest way to get enlightened? What is the quickest way to get enlightened? And we can close on that.
Oh man, I have to tell a little story here. There was this beautiful moment once when Bhante, before you were in robes, asked Stephen Batchelor, "Are you enlightened?" And Stephen Batchelor, you know, and then he said, "Well, about what?" And I thought that was actually a good answer. So, about what? What's the quickest way to get enlightened? About what?
Okay. Thank you so much, Kieran, for your enlightening talk, and hope to have you again soon.
Thank you so much, Bhante. Such gracious hosting. And I super appreciate everybody showing up and having such thoughtful questions. And thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thank you for joining, everyone. This is the end. Good night and good luck.